The Haunting is a horror film directed by Robert Wise from Shirley Jackson's 1959 novel The Haunting of Hill House. Director Martin Scorsese has placed this film first on his list of the 11 scariest horror films of all time. Even Steven Spielberg declares The Haunting among the scariest films ever made. The Haunting stars Julie Harris, Claire Bloom, Richard Johnson, and Russ Tamblyn. Though during production, Julie Harris suffered from depression and had an uneasy relationship with her co-stars. The movie starts with Dr. John Markway, who narrates the history of the 90-year-old Hill House, which was built by Hugh Crane as a home for his wife. She died when her carriage crashed against a tree as she approached the house for the first time. Crane remarried, but his second wife died in the house from a fall down the stairs. Crane's daughter Abigail lived in the house for the rest of her life, never moving out of the nursery room. She died calling for her nurse companion while the nurse was making out under the veranda with a farmhand. The companion inherited the house, but later hanged herself from a spiral staircase in the library. Hill House was eventually inherited by Mrs. Sanderson, a distant relative of the companion, although the house had stood empty for some time. Markway wishes to study the reported paranormal activity at Hill House and sends invitations for people to join his investigation. However, Mrs. Sanderson demands that Markway allow her heir, Luke Sanderson, to join. Only two other individuals accept: Theodora, a psychic, and Eleanor Lance, who experienced poltergeist activity as a child. Eleanor spent her adult life caring for her invalid mother, whose recent death has left Eleanor with severe guilt. Eleanor overthinks the entire time on the drive there. She's led in by the groundskeeper of the house, and as she drives closer, she's stunned by the aura of the house and says the house is staring at her and that she contemplates turning her car around, but she continues. She then enters the house and it has very gothic furniture and statues which matches the outside aesthetic of the house. She still overthinks everything and is on edge the whole time. Shortly after, with everyone gathered together, they have dinner together. Then the group finds that the mansion's walls were constructed with angles askew, resulting in off-center perspectives and doors that open and close by themselves. During their first night in the house, Eleanor and Theo are terrified by banging sounds made against the door to Theo's bedroom. The mirror in Theo's room has frost on it and the room becomes cold as the banging continues. The pair then hear menacing laughter. Luke and the doctor are in the hallway as Eleanor opens the door. However, they later report the house had been silent for them. In the morning, the words "Help Eleanor, come home" are found scrolled in a chalky substance on a wall, distressing Eleanor. The group explores the house, discovering a huge marble statue, apparently of Saint Francis curing lepers. A few of them claim it tells a story of each of them, and they each personally represent a character from the statue. Then the Doctor, Luke, and Theodora explore the library with the spiral staircase, but Eleanor has a severe reaction that prevents her from entering. Leaning over the veranda to look at the library's tower, she becomes dizzy and is caught by Markway, who speculates that he should send her home, but Eleanor protests, blaming the house. That evening, Dr. Markway discovers a cold spot outside the nursery room. That night, on Markway's insistence, Theo moves into Eleanor's room, and they fall asleep in the twin beds. Eleanor is awakened by the voice of a man speaking and a woman laughing. As Eleanor is scared, she asks Theo to hold her hand, but soon she feels a crushing grip. As Eleanor hears the sounds of a young girl crying, she shouts at whoever is hurting the child. Theo then awakens to find that Eleanor has moved from the bed to the couch, and Eleanor realizes it was not Theo's hand she held. The next day, Markway's wife joins the investigation. Then Eleanor, who had begun developing feelings for Markway while unaware that he was married. With everyone else, they discover the doors to the nursery wide open. Markway's wife demands a room in the nursery. That night, in the living room, the group experience loud banging and an unseen intruder attempting to force its way into the room. The banging moves towards the nursery, where sounds of destruction are heard. Eleanor runs towards the source and discovers Grace is missing. Later, Eleanor's mental instability worsens as she enters the library and climbs the dilapidated spiral staircase, followed by Markway, who tries to coax her down. At the top, the only jump scare that is in the film then happens as Eleanor suddenly glimpses at Grace's face through a trap door. Startled, she nearly falls to her death before being rescued by Markway. Markway becomes concerned that Eleanor's obsession with Hill House, in spite of its dangers, then sends Eleanor on her way away from the house. Eleanor pleads to stay, but Markway insists that she leave. Eleanor then drives off and speeds towards the front gate. The steering wheel begins to turn by itself, and Eleanor struggles to regain control before surrendering to the unseen force. A female figure suddenly appears and runs past in front of the car, causing Eleanor to crash into a tree and die. Markway and the others arrive to find that it is Grace, who says the house has been keeping her lost on purpose. She ended up in the attic when she was trying to find a way back to Dr. Markway, and Eleanor saw her. She was unaware of how she found her way outside the house or got in front of Eleanor's car. Luke observes that Eleanor deliberately aimed the car at the tree, but Markway asserts that something was in the car with her. He notes that the tree was the same one where Mrs. Crane died. Theo remarks that Eleanor got what she wanted, to remain with the house. Convinced at last of the supernatural forces, Luke says it ought to be burned down and the ground sowed with salt. Over a final shot of the house where part of the opening narration is repeated, this time by the voice of Eleanor. The movie then ends. The Haunting is at heart an old-fashioned haunted house movie. When watching, you should immerse yourself into how things were back in that time period in order to truly appreciate and experience the film. The Haunting has really good scenes with camera work which was ahead of its time. The house itself has a lot of intricate furnishings which you could pause at any frame and just stop and admire the aesthetic. Throughout the film, there is an eeriness and unsettling feeling which is executed well. I would recommend this film to those who appreciate classic horror films, and it is a must-watch for any horror film enthusiast.